Hey everyone, welcome to our live Q&A for April. I'm here with Rachel Churchman and Sarah Ball, and they're going to be discussing the importance of business continuity to businesses, regardless of whether you have ISO 22301 certification. Just to give you a little bit of a rundown of how this will work, Rachel and Sarah are just going to go over the basics to start with, and then we're going to open the floor to any questions that anyone has. So at that point, I'll unmute you, and then you'll be able to ask any questions that you may have. If there's anything that you want to say beforehand, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll pick it up afterwards. But yeah, I'll unmute you after that initial bit. So hand over to you guys.
Thanks very much, Steph. So yes, we're going to start with some of the basics around business continuity, which may answer some of your questions. I just get a feel for what business continuity is, and then we'll answer any questions that may arise at that point. So Rachel is our resident expert on business continuity, so we're going to be picking her brains today.
Not sure about expert.
So let's start with the real basics. What is business continuity planning, and how can it help businesses?
Okay, yep, that's the nice start with a nice easy one. Thank you for that, Sarah. Okay, so business continuity and business continuity planning is really fundamentally, it's all about preparing your business to be able to keep running and delivering its products and services, or whatever it is that you do, or recover quickly when an unexpected disruption hits you. So, and those disruptions could be all sorts of different things that impact you as a business. So it's kind of, best way to think about it is, I guess it's a safety net. It's one of those things you create, you test, you have in place. You hope it's never going to happen. It's a bit of, I always think of it as BCP being a bit of an insurance that you're not actually having to pay for.
Yeah.
The only investment really is the business putting the time and the thought into what it is that they do and what could stop it from running. And it's peace of mind. It's having a plan in place to avoid the panic if the worst does happen. So it does create a kind of that reassurance in the organisation. But it's not just about surviving disasters. Everyone suddenly always thinks, oh, business continuity, that's my premises blowing up, or, being completely flooded, or, something massive happening. Actually, it's just about being able to adapt fast if you get a disruptor that might actually only impact a small part of your business. It might not be something even that hits the whole business. I guess some examples could be, you might have a key component in your supply chain. They go pop, something happens there. It's not bringing you to a complete standstill, but it's really impacting your ability to do something. So having a BCP plan in place might actually just enable you to pivot from using that supplier to a different one, who you've already spoken to, who you've already done a bit of due diligence with, and you know that they're going to be okay to pick up and run and pick up from where your other supplier left off. Another example that's probably relevant to companies, COVID. That was a big thing.
That was a big one. Yeah.
But most businesses are actually fairly quick to adapt to working on a remote basis. And in my experience, those that had BCP in place already, who'd planned for loss of premises or power, were in a better position because they'd already planned for all of their staff to have laptops and be able to work from home.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of where, business continuity brought that peace of mind, and it enabled those companies to get up and running quickly. So yeah, it's just a good way of taking that step back, looking at what's critical, what you do, and what the strategies are that you might need to consider to get you back up and running should they happen. So it's your plan B, basically.
Yeah.
And you asked about how it can help all businesses. Just before we move on to the next question, one thing I've personally seen happen in every single business continuity implementation I've done is that planning and reviewing all of those critical activities actually helps flush out inefficiencies in the business. So it helps you understand all of those things that slow us down but don't necessarily grind us to a halt. Great to understand as a business, because then you can do something about it and actually become more efficient as a result of it. And that's before you've even written your plan. So yeah, there's definitely benefits to taking a planned approach.
a benefit you can reap before the disruptor actually occurs,
Before
and
you
you get
even
to see it happen in progress. Yeah, okay,
exactly,
perfect.
before you even get to put in pen to paper on the plan. Definitely.
Okay, and obviously the ISO standard relevant to business continuity is 22301. We're not suggesting here that necessarily every business should fully implement that as a management system, but
No.
how can the requirements within that sort of steer businesses in how to develop their own business continuity arrangements?
No, you're absolutely right. 22301 is obviously the international standard for business continuity, and as like any ISO standard, it provides that framework for best practice. But I mean, you and I, Sarah, we're seeing more and more companies aligning to the standard and not necessarily going for full certification.
Absolutely.
You don't need to aim for certification straight away. It's more like you can pick up the standard and use the standard as a bit of a roadmap, that framework that logically guides you through what you need to be considering from a business continuity perspective. As with all ISO standards, it's that clause 8, that operational clause, that would, that's the one that gets you to kind of logically work through it in the right order and ask and consider the right things to get you to have everything you need to fully understand your business and disruptions and dependencies, to then be able to write your plans to fit your budget, your complexity, what it is that you do. Probably the bit that sounds big and scary to most companies, which is actually probably the most value add clause, is business impact analysis, or BIA. This is the quite high up in clause 8, logically, and this is the clause that asks you to consider all facets of your business, all areas, not just IT, not just DR, it's everything. What is a critical activity that you do as a business? What could potentially disrupt that activity? Because that's really key. You need to be considering not just the big disruptions, but the little things that can come in sideways or come in sort of, from outside parties that can impact you.
Yeah.
And then you need to have a look at, what these activities are depending on. So it's not just what you do and what could stop it, but it's everything that supports that activity for the business. People, technology, suppliers, it can be premises, your supply chain, all sorts of things you need to consider. You need to consider SLAs, contractual things that you've signed up to. How are we going to communicate to the outside world if the worst happens, to kind of preserve our reputation? Have we got peak deadlines or peak operating periods? There's a lot of layers you need to go and poke at before you're informed to go and write your business continuity plan. So clause 8 in the standard, for me, asks all the right questions in all the right order to walk you through planning, through to writing a plan, through to actually communicating it and testing it and deploying it in the business.
That's interesting then, that the plan is much more of an end point rather than a starting point, because I think a lot of people think, right, I've got a business continuity plan, and they jump right in there. Let's create a plan, but BIA has to come before that, right? Okay, perfect.
It has to, I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an organisation and they've jumped straight from we need a plan to write a plan, and it's always on the big stuff, and it always misses out the actual disruptors, the things that actually stop things from working. So it's logical. All ISO standards are logical, but this particular one is also quite prescriptive, and descriptive. So it's really good guidance. If you follow it and consider everything, you're not going to miss anything.
It is like a step-by-step plan. Just work through that clause 8 stage by stage.
Pretty much.
And you can develop a really robust plan. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
So is the BIA the first step then?
I'm trying to put my standard knowledge to the test now. Yeah. So
would
yeah,
you
it
say
pretty
you'd
much is.
start with that, or is there a first step you would do before you encourage people to start on the BIA? What would be the first thing you would say to start?
The first thing in a business, as with any kind of project, is you need to get the stakeholders involved. So you can't just jump in and start with a BIA, because BIA, remember, we're talking to every part of the business. So we need a little bit of leadership support for that, because we're going to go and be talking to different areas of the business, taking them away from their day job. So you definitely need to have that top management support. So again, I'm kind of walking through the ISO standards here, because they're kind of fundamental, really. You need to understand what you do, so it's your context. So you need to understand your business and what areas you need to go and poke. Then you need to have that leadership support, so that we're getting that engagement and that communication in the business, that this is what we're looking to do. Here's how we need you to help. Then you're going to walk through making sure you've got the right people involved in the BCP planning. So roles, responsibilities, getting them, speaking to the people who know the operational area, not just the heads of department, the people at the coalface doing the work. Chances are they'll have workarounds, strategies and solutions that they've already got in place. We just haven't got them written down anywhere. They are already doing business continuity without even knowing it. So we need to know about those. Then you'd walk through, if you were doing a management system, you'd walk through the planning, the sort of risks, opportunities and objectives, but obviously that's not necessary if you're just aligning. You do need to make sure you've got the right resources in place to support the business continuity activities and plans that you're going to end up putting in place, that you've got the structure in place to make sure people get trained and communicated to, and that we control all of our plans. Then you're into clause 8, which is getting your sleeves rolled up, talking to the right people, finding out the right information to then be able to get stuck into business impact analysis. And then the next step after that, like I say, is strategies and solutions, because chances are most organisations are already doing business continuity. They just don't know it. That I don't know, you've got a system that's a little bit flaky in the business, that you have to input certain information into, once a week or twice a week or daily, whatever, falls over quite regularly. So guess what? That team have a manual workaround. They've got a sheet where they capture the right information, and when it comes back up again, they'll put all of that information into the system. I know it sounds really crazy, but that's a plan B. They've already got a plan to keep them moving, keep things going, whilst IT or the supplier or whoever is fixing that particular system. So
I mean, I think we even have some in Blackmores, in terms of there's a few clients I visit don't have the best internet connection on their site. So I have ways of working that doesn't require an internet connection, and then I sync everything when I get back to the home office, and, things like that you don't think of as business continuity, but it actually is a strategy and a solution. It is, context,
because if you didn't have that in place, you wouldn't necessarily be able to go and deliver that piece of work to that client if it was solely reliant on the internet. I had a client similar a few years ago, and their office was like a Faraday cage. Couldn't explain it, but it was just dead from an internet point of view. So you pre-prepare, work offline, and then sync.
And if the worst comes to worst and the laptop doesn't turn on that day for whatever reason, pen and paper always in the bag as well.
Exactly.
That's business continuity at its most basic level, isn't it? If I don't
always
have
a plan B. Definitely.
Okay. And final question before we sort of open up to questions from anyone else. What do you think is often overlooked when companies are new to business continuity?
Okay, so one of them we have actually covered already, which is jumping straight into writing the plan without kind of doing the homework and the hard work beforehand. And in my experience, I could almost write the plan for them, because it's always DR, it's always IT, and IT are magic. They will bring everything back at the switch of flick of a switch. All just happens. So it's DR, and then premises. It always seems to be flood, power outage, or IT. And what they're not necessarily doing is considering those critical activities that may not rely on IT, may not rely on premises. It might be that you've got engineers out on the road in fleet vehicles with, might be your leasing company or your fleet company, or even just the engineers with their knowledge and their experience and skills. You may have single points of failure from a people point of view, that if they disappear, grinds a service or a product to zero delivery. So that's where the BIA comes into its own. It gets you to think about all the critical activities. Another thing I have seen are that business continuity plans are sometimes written just at a plan, which is too high level, that doesn't actually then provide any practical guidance as to what to do in the event of a specific scenario happening. So they've got a plan, and it says who does what at a high level, but it doesn't actually give the plan, doesn't give the kind of playbook, if you like. I think that's, there's lots of different ways. Response plan, playbook doesn't have that level of detail in it. So they've got a plan, but if the worst happens, no one actually can pick something up and know, okay, what am I doing? What's my role? How do we get this back up and running?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you might have all of that, but no one knows about it. So you've got zero communication. So we've got lovely, all singing, shiny plan and response plans, but they've not been communicated to those who have an active part in the plan, which means that if they're invoked, are we confident those people will be able to know instinctively what they need to do, what needs to happen? Another thing is testing. That's always a challenge, though, because no one wants to go and poke the bear, do they, to see, okay,
is this going to break?
What's really going to happen? If this happen, what is really going to happen? But the whole value is in the testing of those business continuity plans. You need to make sure they've captured everything and considered everything that you think they need to. It's not just doing an IT test. Or Sarah, you and I have spoken about this in the past.
Yeah,
a lot of people. Well, we cover obviously ISO 27001 as well as a team. And I don't know about you, but I'm often seeing business continuity testing evidenced through a file test restore, or maybe a server restore, something quite small, quite specific, and it's nearly always the same one that gets tested every year. That's not effectively testing your BCP plan. That's testing your backup.
Yeah,
it's not testing business continuity. So it's about testing the big stuff so that you're confident in your plan. Because if you never test it, you're never going to have that confidence that everyone knows what they're doing, everything you've thought of is correct, and there's nothing you've forgotten.
Yeah, and I think, test restores are definitely part of what you can do, but it has to be more than that, doesn't it? It has to be over the course of the year. You need to be looking at more than just the file restore function, and make sure that other elements of the plan are working, and that, as you said earlier, that people know what they need to do. Because when it is an urgent situation, a bit of an emergency, people can get a bit flustered. They're maybe not thinking as clearly, and the idea with this continuity planning is you've already done the thinking, now you just need to do the doing. Whereas if your plan doesn't have that detailed actions in it, you're going back to still trying to think on the fly whilst there's an emerging situation, whilst you've got a lot of other pressures. And that's kind of what you're trying to avoid with business continuity planning, isn't it? It's having to think in the moment. It's like, we've already thought this through, we've considered all the different angles, and now we just have to go into doing what we said we were going to do. That's also where that
communication and also that's where the communication comes in, so everyone knows the part that they play in a response. Because often when something bigger does happen in an organization, everyone wants to help, everyone wants to do the right thing or try to do the right thing, and what you don't want is people making decisions based on what they think is the right thing to do, when actually you've already gone down that thought process and your plan is different. So it's also having that communication as to, am I in the gold team, command and control, making the bigger decisions at the top and having all the information fed to me? Am I in the silver team or the expediter team in the middle with an active role in a plan, and I know exactly what I'm doing and how I'm going to do it? Or are you in the bronze team, everybody else who just needs to be told, we've got business continuity, it's happening, we will keep you informed, here's what we need you to do? So important that everyone knows the part they play.
Definitely. And so important that you communicate that you're in a BCP event, so that you don't have dozens of people ringing IT all saying this isn't working, that isn't working, or, you know, all communicating the office manager to say there's an issue with the premises or whatever it may be. And you need to say, right, we're aware of it, we've invoked it, let us get on with it, kind of thing at that point, and we'll keep you informed. So yeah, no, that's really good.
And don't underestimate the importance of communicating externally as well if the worst happens. I know you don't always want to draw attention to the fact that you're in business continuity, and it's not always appropriate to communicate externally all the time. But if you are experiencing a disruption and you are in business continuity and it is having an impact on your clients or your customers, effective external communication supports your reputation. By actually saying, yes, we know we've got a problem, we're working on it, here's how we're going to keep you informed. You know, your reputation is the hardest thing to get back if it's lost. So effective external communication can be a massive requirement when it comes to business continuity. There's some companies out there that do it really well. I know it sounds awful, but was it CrowdStrike? I know CrowdStrike have had a few incidents over the years.
Yeah.
And even though they do have incidents, that is one thing they're really, really good at. They're really, really good at being effective in their communication and effective in their follow-up communication and sharing the lessons learned. You know, this is what happened, this is what we did, this is what we're going to do moving forward. It really helps preserve their reputation because they're kind of not fessing up, but they're just being transparent.
Yeah.
You know, it happens.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I think that's given us a good sort of grounding around what business continuity is. It's just wondering if we've got any questions from anyone who's joined.